This year we also have a few sessions related to rather broad PDF topics, like there was this color session, and now there is going to be one about fonts and text in PDF. What I can say from now, I don't know, doing about 15 years of support, that fonts and text are by far the most tricky and difficult things and also problems in PDF. And what I want to do is, in this session, to introduce you to what font tools we offer to help you to manage fonts in PDF files. And then, in order to understand these tools better, we need also to understand how fonts are organized in PDF. So this will be the second part. Then I have a few examples, basically screenshots of photos from glyph problems, from font problems in PDF files. And then I want to go into more detail into our font tools. And I hope that by then everybody of you has a better understanding of the font tools in pdfToolbox. At any time, I mean, this is really technical stuff. So at any time, just interrupt me, let me know if something remains unclear. It's not that much related to any new pdfToolbox features. Most of the stuff has been around for a long time now. There is at least one feature that is rather new, but yeah, anyway, just let me know if you have any questions. So these are the font tools in pdfToolbox. There is basically two profiles: list potential font problems and fix potential font problems. So I want to talk about mostly the first one, the font checking thing. And then there is a font report, creating a font report. There is Explore PDF, an interactive tool. And there is Explore Fonts. And I will cover them, at least briefly, all of them. But first I want to start with the two profiles. So they are predefined profiles, I think, in Essential or Prepress, I don't know, library. And there is the list potential font problems. And in this profile we have put all font checks that we think are at least an indicator that something is difficult or even wrong in a PDF file. And before we now go into detail, I first try to translate these checks in our profile into questions. So the first check that we have is character is not white space, but glyph is empty. So let me just ask, who of you right now knows what that means? Okay, so that we want to change. So I have translated this into two questions here on the left-hand side. So what actually is a glyph? And at the third bullet here we have what actually is an empty glyph. And the next check is character references notdef glyph. So what actually is a notdef glyph? Then we have font name is not unique. So okay, we will understand that later on. No, I forgot encoding entry prohibited for symbolic TrueType font. So I've translated that into, okay, what actually is a font encoding and what is a symbolic TrueType font, a symbolic font. Okay, next is font is not embedded. I think that is clear. Then we have font reverts to notdef glyph as a check. So these are also, I was just saying, this is a profile, a predefined profile that you can find in pdfToolbox. and that has allows you to check for a font situation in a PDF file and to find out whether the font situation in the PDF file is correct or whether there are maybe any hidden problems. And what I want to do in this session is to explain a little bit what is the background of all of these checks. So font reverts to notdef glyph, so we need to understand what a notdef glyph is, and then glyph in subset font is missing, so again we need to understand what the glyph is, and so forth. Then there is no CMAP entry in a simple two-type font, and then there is a very cryptic one, type 2 CID font, CID to GID map, invalid or missing. So they are really, most of the users just say, okay, I don't get that. What does it actually mean? They understand there might be a problem, but what I want to achieve in this session is to explain a little bit why these checks are there and what actually is the meaning of them. So, and as a first step, so just in order to move forward, I need to provide a few answers. So, because if we don't have an understanding of what a glyph is, we cannot move on. So, and what you here see at the bottom is our 3 screenshots from our font browser that allows you to browse into the internals of an embedded font file in a PDF. And the glyph basically is what you find in a font listed in numbers, and if you click on a glyph entry in your font, it displays the glyph, and the glyph actually is a shape that is in the font associated with the glyph ID. So on the left-hand side, this is how it's called, it's GID, glyph ID, and that glyph ID 52 is associated with this outline, and everybody of us who's able to read can see that this is a C. So that is a glyph, and important is a glyph is an outline. A glyph doesn't have any meaning, so the software at this point, when it finds the glyph here, it doesn't know that it's a C. It just has the outline of this character. That is important to understand. Then there is a particular glyph which is called notdef, which should be present in every font, and that is a fallback. So in a two-type font that is on GID 0 by convention, so the first glyph ID in a font, in a two-type font, is a character that should be used if the glyph lookup, so if no real glyph can be found for any reason, so for whatever reason the program is not able to associate a proper glyph ID, then the processor, the viewer, should use the notdef. So notdef, not defined, means that is the glyph that is used if there is no proper glyph found for the character. And then an empty glyph is just a glyph without an outline. It just, and you would use that for a tab or for a space or for whatever. So it just doesn't paint anything. So now we understand what is a glyph, what is a notdef glyph, and what is an empty glyph. So in order to move forward, and after we have understood that, in order to answer the other questions, we need to dig deeper into font technology and into PDF. So that is the next part of the presentation. So this is a lot of text. Let's start at the top. So what happens, or how is the connection between my PDF page and the font? Internally, the font is associated with some text that is encoded into my page via an internal font name. So that is, in this case, it's F25. So it doesn't have to do anything with the real font name, which would be Courier here. The base font name would be Courier there. The internal name is F25. So, and most probably the next font when the PDF file has been created would be F26 and so forth. So usually they are just numbered, but every PDF writer does its own. So one uses FO instead of F. So it doesn't have any meaning it just, of course, has to be work together. The page description, when it refers to the font, needs to use F25, and that is the second part here in the resources dictionary here of my page. I have a resources dictionary, and there I have a font section, and in that font section there is the actual font, F25 again. And of course this has to work together. Page description and font resources. And then in the font resources in the PDF file, you find further information like the base font name, the font type, in this case it's TrueType, the max glyph bounding box, that is the maximum size of a glyph, and the character width. So the width of each character in the font file. So that characters can be placed one after the other, then the viewer needs to know the width of each glyph. And then is optional also the font object. So only inside of this PDF resource entry for the font, there may be an embedded font. And then the font is a data stream. So that is really important to understand. If you embed a font into PDF file that is not translated into PDF syntax, the font is more or less kept the same. So some data is removed usually, but that depends on the PDF creator. Most of the font is just embedded as it was in your file system before. And only parts of that information are translated into the font resource object of the PDF file. Is that understood? So this is really important. You have the, if you want, you have the PDF part of the font and you have the font part of the font. And the PDF part is formatted in PDF syntax, while the font part is formatted in TrueType syntax, Type 1 syntax, or whatever. And these are these work together by the PDF part, which in a way builds the way from the page description into the font file. And then finally, there is optionally in the, again, here we are at the PDF resources, a mapping to Unicode. And we will learn that later, why that is and or may be important. Here, it's just, this is from our PDF browser, Explore PDF and pdfToolbox. You can have a look at the internal PDF structure, and I've just indicated with arrows here, where you can see that information. So there is an internal name, in this case it's TY1. You have the font resource in the PDF part, that is actually everything you can see here. And then you have the base name, in this case it's Quadrat sans bold with a prefix. The font type is type 1, the bounding box, the character width, it's an array, so we have 185 characters, and for each of these characters we have the width entry, and we have the actual font here embedded, which in this case is not TrueType, but type 1. Okay? So you can use pdfToolbox to just look into the font resources as present in the PDF file. And these font resources in the PDF file, these have to be there every time you use text or a font. But the embedded font here, that is optional. So that may as well be in your file system in the fonts folder. So now, what happens if you have in your page a code for a character? What needs the viewer then to do in order to derive from that code the actual glyph? So the first here is, there is a character code in the page description. That is just a number, it could be 1 byte, it could be 2 byte, whatever. Yeah. And then you have a mapping from this code to the glyph ID and the font. And that, this way from the character code and the page to the glyph ID and the font. That is, you have different terms for that, but you can say this is the encoding, or this is a headline here, or the glyph selection, or the glyph mapping, whatever. So there are several names for this rather complex procedure. And this mapping may take place via an encoding entry, and the encoding entry is in the PDF part of the font, or if that encoding entry is not present, then what is called the built-in encoding takes place, and that is the encoding that is part of the font file. Is it clear? So you have in the font file, you have an encoding that may be overwritten by an encoding entry in the PDF part, but if the encoding entry is not present, then the built-in encoding is used. And then that encoding or glyph selection in a miracle way leads us to the glyph ID in the font. And this is the really complex part of the whole stuff. It depends. It really depends on the situation. There are innumerable different ways to do the encoding. So first, it's different for type 1 fonts, which can be embedded. It's different to true type fonts or to double byte fonts. So the encoding rules are all different for the 3 font types. And then even for each of these, there may be different ways. So these are just examples here. And the goal for this session definitely is not that you remember them. So nobody really remembers them all the time. So one has to look up the PDF specification. The goal is more to make you understand that it's a rather difficult process to get from the character code and the page description to the actual glyph outline. Yeah, so for type 1, for instance, these are the old ones invented by Adobe, type 1 specification. They come from the PostScript world, so you have a character code, just a number, as in any of these cases in the page. Then you have an encoding entry that would let you know that this is using MacRoman encoding, so the font is used according to the MacRoman encoding table that associates a character code with a glyph name, and that the glyph name could then be space or capital L or whatever. And since a type 1 font has names for glyphs internally, once you have that glyph name, capital L, you already have the glyph in the type 1 fonts and you're done. In a true type font, true type has been invented by Apple and Microsoft as a competitor in a way, a little bit for type 1 fonts, but also in order to have a font type that is that would work in an Apple operating system and in a Microsoft Windows operating system. And therefore, because this file wants to serve both operating systems which use different encodings, this font format is much more complex than a type 1 font, true type. Which in the beginning led to a situation where in pre-press environments, true type fonts were not allowed at all, which actually doesn't make sense. They are good and well-defined, as well-defined as type 1, but they're more complex. That is true. So we have the character code. In this case, you don't have, you have an encoding entry, but this encoding entry defines custom relationships between a glyph name and the character code, but you have a glyph name then. But then for true type fonts, you have to go to the Adobe glyph list, because in a true type font, there is only its Unicode CMAP, and then from there you go to the glyph ID. Again, it's not important that you remember that. You only have to see that there is a major difference between type 1 fonts and type 2 type fonts. And then you have 2 more font types in PDF. Both are double byte fonts. There is a CID type 0 and the CID type 2. And this is just yet another example. So you have a character code, you have an entry identity age, and that identity age basically means you can use the character code in the page description as the glyph ID, and then you're there. So this is in a way is the most easiest case here because the character code is identical to the glyph ID. So this again, I already introduced us, so you should have heard at least some of that. This is an overview about all the font types in PDF. So we have two major flavors of simple fonts and two major flavors of composite fonts or 2-byte fonts. Simple fonts use just 1 byte, and that means you are limited to 256 glyphs, while double-byte fonts have a lot more. For Asian fonts, for instance, that is important. I think you know that. And then for type 1, you have two flavors. There's the classic one, the old one, type 1, that really uses glyph names. And CFF stands for compact font format. Adobe has developed it once they found out for PDF that the file size is a matter. And then they don't use any names anymore, but just byte codes instead. So just to make the font file more compact. CFF. Then you have two-type. Then you have types. These are not real fonts. So type 3 is more, you would use that for decorations or so. They are not really fonts, and they use actually PDF code for encoding the glyphs. So you can, in a way, if you want, you can make this whole page to become a glyph in a type 3 font. But they are rare. And then there are open type, they are also rare. Open type is, in a way, it's a container format that internally may use, again, type 1 and type 2 type. So these, basically, you have here already just two basic font formats, type 1 and 2 type, and the same applies to composite fonts. So internally, a composite or double-byte font is either type 0, and then it falls back to being CFF-based or type 1-based, or it's type 2, and then it's 2-type-based. So it's a little bit confusing, I guess, because we have, on this level, we have type 1, which is a simple font, and then we have CID type 0 and CID type 2. And one has to understand type 1 is on a very different level. So it's while type 0 and type 2 are on the same level, type 1 is something completely different, or more or less much more different than the other two. This is the one thing you may take away. And the other thing is, in the end, all of these different font formats are either type 1 PostScript based or 2 type based. And then because 2 type is more flexible and by that also creates many problems sometimes, I also want to dig a little bit deeper into that topic. Is it understandable so far? So, okay. So as I've said, all font types are either type 1 in the end or 2 type-like. And 2 type, since 2 type was designed to work on Mac and Windows, it has some advanced features. So while a type 1 font only has one built-in encoding, a 2 type font may have various encodings, and these encodings are called CMAPs. So this is an expression you will encounter frequently when you deal with fonts, and with 2 type fonts obviously only. One thing you need to understand, so if CMAPs is written like that, then usually it should refer to a 2 type font, while if it's written like that, that is something completely different. It has also to do with fonts, but that is only in CID fonts and defines font sets of fonts, while a CMAP is a mapping of IDs to glyphs. And then another special thing in 2 type fonts is that they may have an embedding flag. So a 2 type font may have a flag that says this font must never be embedded into a PDF file. That is not frequently present, to be honest, and frequently even it contradicts what the actual license terms say. So you will find fonts where the license terms, the written license terms say this may not be embedded, but the embedding flag is not set, or the other way around. So you cannot trust them. But the next one is more important because it also changes the encoding. A TrueType font may have a symbolic flag, and that flag says this font is not a regular font with A, B, C, D, and so forth. This font is a symbolic font, means it rather has symbols instead of characters, so subdingbards or wingdings fonts. These are examples for symbolic fonts. And the problem with that is that the rules are different. So if a font says it's symbolic, all the encoding information in the PDF part is ignored. So there is encoding information in the PDF part that says this is McRoman encoding, but at the same time the font says I'm a symbolic font. So what should a PDF viewer do then? Should he ignore the encoding entry in the PDF file and trust the font because the font says I'm symbolic, and that means you don't have to use the embolic or the encoding entry, or should the viewer follow the information in the encoding entry? And actually this is not defined. So this is a situation where even in the PDF specification, even in PDF 2.0, it is written, in this case, it depends on the application what to do. So it's undefined. And of course, this is a rather unfortunate situation for any decent provider of PDF software. So this is a problem that should be flagged. And a non-symbolic font that is rather easy then, that should usually use either McRoman or Venanzi. And then another specific thing on TrueType is that the notdef, because TrueType other than type 1 doesn't have names, in type 1 the notdef would have the name with a dot notdef, and in a TrueType font it would just be the GID 0, so CID is not fully correct here, it should be the glyph ID 0.
Dietrich, one question about the symbolic flag. Do you happen to know how is Acrobat, as an example, treating the symbolic flag? Do they?
Yeah, we recently had an example. So what I guess what they do is they try to follow the symbolic flag, but if that fails, then they just use the encoding form of information. So we recently had a support case, and I will have that later on, where Acrobat displayed it correctly, while we think it's not correct, and that was a symbolic flag. And if you symbolic font, if you ignore the symbolic flag and follow the encoding information, then the glyphs are displayed, and I think Acrobat is doing that. So but it's, again, there is no way to find that out other than to find a file that has this problem and put that into Acrobat. So I'm pretty much through with I think the really difficult technical stuff. So just but I think one more thing we need to cover. So far we only talked about glyph mapping. So by now we only have the shapes of the glyphs, but we don't have a meaning to that. So that means we can create that page, but we are not able to find text in the page or to copy text from there, because that all would mean that we have more than just the outlines. We would have to know that this is a P, a D, and a F. You understand? So that we need to have semantics to our glyphs. And first, and again, that is important, that is by no means required for PDF. So you can have a very well designed PDF file that is fully in accordance with the PDF specification, but it's not possible to search for text there, even though there is text. And you don't need that for displaying the page. So you only need it for reading it, for searching it, for copying text. And then again, so it's in the same way complex as the encoding that I explained beforehand. Again, you have several ways to derive semantics for your glyphs. And I think what you should understand from this slide is the general term for that is Unicode. So Unicode is another ISO standard that defines names, semantics for shapes. So Unicode, each of the, as of today, known glyph shapes is associated with a glyph name in the Unicode table. And for instance, you could map from a glyph to a Unicode code point just implicitly, if you know that this font or this text is using MacRoman encoding, you have a character ID. That character ID is associated with the glyph name, and from the glyph name, you already know which Unicode code point is associated with that glyph. Or you may do that explicitly via a Unicode CMap in a two-type font. So in a two-type font, okay. Well, we have in a two-type font, you may have several CMaps, and one of them could be there just to associate the glyph ID, the glyph ID with a Unicode code point. And these are just other ways to derive Unicode semantics from a glyph or from a character ID in the page description. And this is a tool, I think a nice tool in pdfToolbox, the font report, that displays the glyph shape at the top, and below the Unicode code point number, the CID in the page description, and the Unicode meaning of this, and this is correct. So we have 1, 2, 3, bullet, and end dash. And this is an example where it's not in the same way correct. So we have, for instance, here, via the Unicode table, it's associated with a % sign, but that definitely is not a % sign, and that definitely is not a dollar sign. So you can see that maybe this PDF file just looks great when being displayed, but if you would search for a % sign, for instance, you would find this character, which is not a % sign. Or if you would copy the text out of the PDF page, you would get a wrong result. Okay, let's close this. A CMap, I just try to provide answers now to all the questions. A CMap is an encoding table in a TrueType font. A font encoding is the connection between a character code and a glyph in the font. So font encoding in a PDF specification, it's called glyph selection or glyph lookup. So these are synonyms for the same thing. A simple font is a 1-byte font. A CID font is a 2-byte font. A type 2 CID font is a 2-byte font with an internal TrueType structure. And the CID to GID map, I haven't covered that so far, is essential in a type 2 CID font. You need that to go from your character ID. Basically says that. So it's a table that maps from the character ID in the page description to the glyph ID in the font. A symbolic TrueType font, we covered that, and that is just recapitulating. Fonts are embedded into PDF as independent streams, so the connection to the PDF file takes place via resource dictionaries in the PDF, but the font object itself more or less remains as it was on the disk before it was embedded. So I hope this is now became a little more clear, so what these checks mean. So just a few examples. Character is not white space, but glyph is empty. So our engine finds an empty glyph, so there is no glyph contour associated with it, while the Unicode says this actually is not a white space. So something went wrong there. So either the Unicode or the glyph lookup went wrong. And then the notdef glyph may be referenced, so this is not correct. It shouldn't be referenced directly. It should always only be used as a fallback. Encoding entry shouldn't be present for a symbolic TrueType font because it would be ignored. A font name is not unique. I will get back to that. Font is not embedded, it's clear. Font reverts to notdef glyph. That is actually pretty much the same as glyph in subset font is missing, so the glyph lookup fails, and so the glyph lookup reverts to the notdef. Yeah, glyph width info, I haven't mentioned that. I've mentioned you have the glyph width info, and this is important to align one character after the other, but you have two tables. You have one table in the font part and one table in the PDF part. And of course, these should match. And this is an indication that they don't match the widths in these two entries, these two tables. Then we've got more than one encoding and symbolic TrueType font CMAP. So if symbolic, the built-in encoding is used, which is in the CMAP, and then you should only have one CMAP there. Yeah, this is, I guess in that case, the PDF won't work. So if there is no CMAP entry in the TrueType font, you cannot use the TrueType font. So I think usually you would then have problems already in your viewer. Text cannot be mapped to Unicode. That is not as, it's not rare, but yeah, so it is a limitation, but not for rendering of the page. I already said this is an important table, and wrong encoding for non-symbolic means if it's TrueType, it should use either McRoman or Venanzi. If that is not defined, then it's wrong. So these are the checks here. And this is just, most of the checks are coming from either PDFX4 or PDFA, so you don't have to read that, and I try to hurry a little bit. So most of them are coming from ISO standards, PDF-based ISO standards. Two of them are only related to Unicode, so they are only present in PDFA2. And then there are a few that we as callas software have invented because we think they indicate that there are or may be problems in the PDF file.
Dietrich, before you get the font name, the font reverts to the notdef glyph is similar to the other character references notdef glyph. However, notdef glyphs are prohibited by pdfX4, but a font that reverts to notdef glyph is not covered by pdfX.
Yeah, what I mean is font reverts means the actual font glyph lookup cannot be executed, so there is no result of it, and then instead of the glyph that was been looking for, the notdef is displayed, and that should be the same as glyph in subset font missing. So
what very often our end users, our users are interested in is this PDF correct for printing or not? And a font that reverts to a notdef glyph,
it's not.
It's not. So that should be treated as an error,
yeah.
Whereas font name is not unique, is not of interest in terms of
yeah. I mean, we could go. Yeah, it may make sense to assign different severities here to say this is a warning or more an info or an error, but yeah. So, okay. So now I think it's more. You can see more, so what can actually go wrong. So these are a few examples about missing glyphs, which might have several reasons. So this is an example that I mentioned beforehand. This actually works fine in Acrobat, so you don't have all these ugly notdef characters here. you have proper text, but in fact the PDF file is not correct. So, and again, this is, from the Acrobat point of view, it makes sense to display it, even though it's not correct, because Acrobat is a viewer and not a validator, but an accurate program would rather display this one because the encoding is wrong, because this was a symbolic font used for actual text. So the symbolic font, the symbolic flag was a problem in this font, but you cannot simply remove it because you don't know whether, so you have to try whether it works then better than if you would take the entry serious.
What is the answer from Adobe's side on these type of problems which are introduced partly by the behavior of Acrobat?
There is no answer, and so it's in this case, as I said, in the PDF specification, it's even written that if this fails, if the situation is unclear and not according to the specification, then it depends on the application how to deal with that situation. So it's correct what they're doing. So.
Yeah, but we know that Adobe is fixing silently problems in the PDF files which get opened in Acrobat or Adobe Reader without knowledge of the user. But when he uses Acrobat or Adobe Reader, it's a reference to
yeah, I mean, it's
judge whether the PDF is okay or not.
Right. I mean, but that is as all the time, since we have PDF, it has been like this. So PDF is taken, or reader is taken as a validator for PDF vendors writing PDF creating programs, but it is not a validator, and it's only, I mean, today the industry has many more tools around, and we can only hope that the situation will improve and that reader is not used in a wrong way. So I don't know. So Adobe, of course, Adobe wants to sell their products, and from that standpoint, it definitely makes a lot of sense to not for, I don't know, every tense file say this is not accurate. So.
Yeah, but at least if I set up in the preferences of Acrobat that Adobe Reader or whatever should behave according to a pdfXA standard. Then
you have that? You have that in the preferences? I don't know.
Not really, but we have settings which might get the impression or leave the impression that the user behaves that way.
I don't know.
That has nothing to do with pdfX. This is a valid pdfX file, however, it renders one.
This, I don't know. I don't think so. I'm not sure whether it's correct in pdfX. Anyway, let's. This is rather funny. I think it's old, so I don't know Infinitime, and if there's still a 6 exist, I'm sure they're much better than they were, but it was an advertisement, and that was just funny because they have something gegen. Wir haben etwas gegen teure Schriften means we have something against expensive fonts, and then.
Don't get me.
So this is another example, and here it's an example. We have character ID 0. It seems to be a true type font. There should be a notdef, but the actual glyph here is an N. So the glyph ID that is actually reserved to use a notdef is used for a real character, which is not okay, because then the encoding would refer to this, would have to refer to the character, to the GID 0, which never should happen. And then we have glyph substitution, and I think this is this was present also a long time ago when you traveled to US before ESTA existed. We had problems with the encoding here, so that the wrong glyphs were displayed. Also here, where I guess the N, the small n is replaced with a capital K. And interesting here is that could have two reasons. The one is a problem with the encoding. So we've understood encoding is complex, and the problem might be in the PDF. But interestingly, the problem might as well be in the application, because frequently, and especially if you merge PDF files together, okay, if you merge PDF files together, you may end up with two fonts, subset fonts, for instance, using the same base font name, and that in a viewer may create a situation where they use caching in order to be as fast as possible, and then they extract the font out of the PDF file, use it for displaying it, and then they found another text object that uses internally the same font name, then they think, okay, it's again the same font, so I don't have to extract it again. I already did that beforehand, and I'm using, and then they're using that one, and that frequently leads to a situation where you, the glyph mappings don't match anymore. And therefore, we have a fix-up that is called fixed potential font problems, a profile, and that has a fix-up, and that adds a unique prefix to each of the font names.
But Dietrich, then the problem before was also not a PDF problem per se, it was the problem of the creation application.
You mean which one?
You have
this?
No, the slide before the one you just had.
You mean this?
You write, no. The problem is in the PDF.
Yeah.
Is it really the PDF? No, it's actually the application created.
Yeah, and this, and okay, no, it's perfectly okay to have two font objects with the same font name.
Before, in the slide before, you have written the PDF is the problem.
Yeah.
And I said it's actually not the PDF that is the problem. The viewer shows exactly what's inside the PDF.
The reason, if you see that, the reason could be in the PDF file or it could be in the viewer. So there are two possible reasons. Either the encoding is wrong, and that is here, or the viewer is wrong, while the PDF is okay.
But still, I'm sorry that I'm so picky here, but I have such discussions with a lot of vendors. It's actually not the problem of the PDF, it's the way the PDF was created, as I see it before. Because you said...
It's not the problem of the PDF as specification of a file format.
So
no, it's...
a lot of people claim
okay.
there's a problem in the PDF, and I say, no, the PDF is not the problem.
The PDF file, this particular PDF file is a problem. So that's what I wanted to say. Anyway, so font tools in pdfToolbox in more detail. I think we've covered the first two, the profiles, list potential font problems, and fixed potential font problems. I think we also covered this one, the font report, which I think is specifically useful for finding out this Unicode situation in a PDF file. This is new in 9.4. We have in the PDF, Explore PDF feature in Tools, Explore PDF in the pdfToolbox. We have two new views, and the one at the right-hand side has a kind of a pre-flight symbol, and that allows you to really dig very deep into various PDF objects, amongst which are the fonts. And I have two more screenshots here. So if you drill into that and open the folders, you see that there are some small indicators here, and these indicators are just letters, and that are explained when you open the indicator lookup. And I have zoomed in here, and then you can see for the font whether our engine thinks that there are glyphs missing or corrupt, or has a width conflict between PDF and font file and so forth. And these are indicators. If there is a red D over there, then that shows that our engine thinks there is a glyph missing or corrupt. And this is the screenshot is actually taken from the business card that I had beforehand. And you also have that information not just for the whole font. You also have that for each of the glyphs in the font. And it's not just that. It's also so.
One question: what you just showed is that there was a red R.
5 minutes.
Can you show something? there was a red R, and there was an explanation why the R was red.
The R is it's more down. Here R means glyph is missing and reverts to notdef. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. And then it's not just that, so you even have information here that is the character code in the page 20 that is via encoding mapped to the 1 as a glyph ID, and then you have the Unicode code point as set up in the encoding, and you have another Unicode code point as set up in the font, and both are 20, so they sync, so everything seems to be correct, and then that goes to space, and you have the glyph bits for the PDF and the font. So this is really helpful also for us to, if we receive inquiries and support, to find out what actually is the truth in the PDF file. Yeah, this is just a font browser, and similarly to the Unicode, to the font report here, you can use that to see the glyph shapes that are set up in your font. So that's what I wanted to cover now. So these are the font tools in pdfToolbox, fonts in PDF, issues with glyph selection, and font tools in more details. Any further questions? Then, sorry?
Doing the walk.
You're on the walk? Right.